My name's Bosanec. Today's April 2nd, 2024. The time is 10:02 a.m. We are at the Pewaukee VFW post 9537 in Pewaukee, Wisconsin. I am interviewing Brett Markut, who was born on September 7th, 1988 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and has served in both Ukraine and the Horn of Africa between the years of 2019 and 2023. Brett Markut was a captain in the Army and Army National Guard and has served as both an advisor and force protection officer. Well, Brett, thank you for having us. I'm really excited for this interview.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I think to start this off, I'd want to ask, what were you doing or what led you to entering the service and what were you doing before that?
Sure. Yeah. I guess I've grown up in a military household per se. My dad was in the Ranger Battalion around the 80s. My uncle was in the 82nd Airborne during Gulf War. I had many great grandparents fight in World War II. So just kind of naturally just kind of got brought into kind of a military family.
And then so when you started joining the military, what road did you go to join?
So after high school, I went to college, played a year of football, and then I just kind of figured I needed to try and find some kind of track, something that kind of interests me. You're getting into college right out of high school, kind of don't really know what you want to do with your life, but I always knew I wanted to do something in the military. And because I was already in college, the military had a program called ROTC.
Okay.
My dad growing up was like, "Oh, you should go officer. You should go officer." So he kind of groomed me into that kind of role, I guess. So it was available as another kind of course that I could take concurrent with my college. And then that's where I kind of started with that.
Right. And I believe you had mentioned prior that you went to Marquette's ROTC program. Is that correct?
Yep.
Is there a reason you went with them instead of others? Were there others in the area?
So the main one, I guess, in the Milwaukee area. So I went to Concordia and Mequon.
Okay.
And Marquette ROTC was kind of like the big center hub for multiple schools in Milwaukee. So you had Concordia was a part of it. I think Carroll, but we didn't have any kids from Carroll. Platteville, UWM, Marquette. So any like the schools in the Milwaukee general area would send people to the ROTC program there.
Okay. And so what did your ROTC program look like, and what were your experiences that you had with the program?
Yeah, so when you joined the program, I was contracted through them, so which meant they paid for my tuition after whenever I joined up with them officially. So they paid your full college tuition, and you had an obligation to serve the minimum time requirements. Following graduation, you become an official officer in the Army. You have to at least meet the minimum 4-year requirement, active duty, 8 years as a reserve. For the college tuition. And if you didn't do that, you had to pay the college tuition back. It would be a Monday through Friday kind of a thing. So I would get to Marquette at 5 or 6 in the morning, depending on what it was. You would do physical training for about an hour, and then you do an hour of classes. And then after your classes, I'd run up to Concordia and I'd do a full day of college courses, and then do it all over again.
And did you really enjoy the ROTC program then?
Yeah, I think especially as a young kid, kind of in that college time, it helped kind of shape me into kind of a positive kind of career. You're not partying so much. You're not doing a lot of the fun stuff that a lot of people get in trouble from high school. So for me, it was it gave me some discipline and kind of a purpose to kind of finish finish the ROTC program and college.
And to your knowledge, how did the ROTC program that you were in compare to others that you know of?
we had a good program. They would do kind of interstate competitions between so
Okay.
our they called ours the Golden Eagle Battalion. Madison's was like the Badger Battalion.
Yeah.
So they would do like kind of competitions between
Okay.
them. But it was looked at one of the higher ROTC programs. I guess within Wisconsin.
Okay. Interesting. All right. And so then once you completed your ROTC program, you then had your training. So can you tell me a little bit about like your early weeks of like training and how you adopted into military life?
Sure. I guess the adoption part you already kind of understood. Some of the military. Kind of lifestyle,
Yeah.
the drill and ceremony, kind of how to already function as a soldier in the army for me, by doing the
Yeah.
ROTC
Mhm.
program. So like you already had kind of that basic soldier level kind of skills. Once I graduated college and I graduated the ROTC program, I had to do my official job training, basic training in the army. So that was for me. I was an infantry officer,
Mhm.
so I did the infantry basic
Yeah.
officer leader course, and that was held in Fort Benning, Georgia.
Okay.
I think I did that in 2012,
Okay.
and it was about 3 to 4 months long.
Okay.
And then yeah, so you basically just did all your job training you to be a platoon leader in the army.
So like South is a very hot. Was it in the summer that you went there? And was like how was the weather?
So I went in late winter, early
Okay.
spring. And I'm trying to remember like when
Yeah.
I actually
Mhm.
left. So I think I like actually graduated in like May.
Yeah.
So just kind of backtracking from there. So Georgia's interesting. It's very humid.
Yeah.
It does get really warm and hot during the daytime. However, it drops pretty drastically at nighttime. So you'd be doing patrol operations, running, doing
Yeah.
missions through the woods and stuff all day, sweating, and then you'd stay out, generally set in a patrol base at night, and then the temperature drop. You'd have to be
Yeah.
awake, or you'd have to be, having some people sleeping while the other guys are awake.
Yeah.
So like the mix of very little sleep in addition to the weather conditions, which a lot of times it's raining and it's cold, so it's kind of a challenge.
Yeah.
But it's set to get brand new officers ready for Ranger School, which is on an active duty side how kind of the progression. You become a lieutenant. You get sent to basic officer leader course, and then it's kind of like a prerequisite setting you up for Ranger School. So it's like kind of geared towards that, I guess.
Yeah. So was there like any like very vivid memories that you have of your time in training or like specific moments that like stick out when you think back about your training?
um, yeah, I guess like kind of the tail end of that training. There's like a 5 day field exercise,
Okay.
so you're doing 24-hour operations for that 5 days kind of time period. So you do a mission, you'd set up, you do another mission, you'd set up. So it just kept doing that for 24 hours, or sorry, for 5 days. Um, but you didn't really sleep much, so it was like kind of like sleep deprivation,
Yeah.
and your body's kind of beat up, kind of little food, so you just kind of had to go through that. I A lot of guys like hallucinate when you
Oh,
start kind
right.
of getting to that level. I remember, this is like one of the vivid ones. I remembered one of our guys, kind of seeing him on the end of our patrol base at like 4 or 5 in the morning, and he's like, pressing buttons on a tree. He was thinking it was like a vending machine. So like, stuff like that happens. Georgia's got a lot of wild
Oh,
boars.
yeah.
So you'd set up in a patrol base, in a defensive position overnight, so guys can kind of get sleep and get ready for the next mission. And you'd have wild boars circling you. You guys would have to shoot machine guns with blanks to try
Yeah.
scare them off. So it's different. It's a yeah it's a I was probably 20, 21 years old at the time, and it's
Yeah.
kind of a different experience as
Yeah.
a kind of a young adult.
Yeah. And like along with that, with your training, like Obviously, that was a very difficult week that happened there. But like, what was like going into like your training the like most difficult transition? Like you said, ROTC program it did a great job
Mm-hmm.
helping you adapt to this going into training. But like, were there any like super difficult things that you had to transition from, even from ROTC to your training?
Um, I think the bit for me the biggest thing was just the maturity aspect, and as a you're a young adult, you just got out of college, you got all your college friends that you went to school with that are kind of having fun, but you have to become an adult way faster, because at the end of the day, once you finish your basic training, you're a second lieutenant in charge of 40
Yeah,
40 guys, and you could go to combat at any time. So like you're responsible for other people, which as a young adult, that can be difficult for people. So I think the whole program, the ROTC program, and kind of the whole training aspect kind of help you become more disciplined, mature and responsible, I guess.
yeah. And this is so during your training, was there any restrictions on like how you'd like contact people, or like if you wanted to like talk to your family or anything, was there, how would you do that?
Yeah, it generally was generally you could have phones,
Okay.
so at night or whatever, I could call, text people. Um, when we did like long term kind of field work, generally you wouldn't have your phone on you. You're it's kind of simulates real combat ops. You
Yeah.
you don't have your phone on you. So and it generally you don't have access to a charger anyway,
Of
so
course.
it would die. So yeah, usually on the field stuff you leave your phone, but when you're not doing field work, you're just doing kind of your coursework, your PT, all that stuff. You had access to phone, computer,
Okay.
email, stuff like that.
All right. And then, so once you completed your training, then was there any difficulty in transitioning from then you complete your training to anything past that? Was like there difficulty in that, or did you find that similar to your transfer from ROTC to training?
I think so you do the training,
Yeah.
which is great,
Yeah.
but that's your baseline, right?
Yeah.
Um, Once you actually integrate with a new unit,
Yeah.
guys you've never met before, and guys that know a lot more than you do, that can be a challenge. And what I kind of figured out, right away. And part of this was mentorship, kind of getting mentored from more senior officers. Was to listen to your NCOs, your non-commissioned
Yeah.
officers, your guys, who have had a lot of experience, and just developing a good relationship with them. I
Yeah.
found that ended up working, and really that's how officers should be, doing
Yeah.
their jobs.
So like you wish you then knew like anything, like obviously training does like a great job getting that baseline for you, but is there anything else like along with that that you would wish you had known even going past your training then?
I think on the training side, I think they do as much as they possibly
Yeah,
can. At some point, you have to
get out there.
get out there and just work through problems and work through situations and get experience. I think as you progress, you get more experience. It's kind of like anything. You get better, more proficient. As you kind of develop the experience, but kind of similar, thing in any field where
Yeah.
training's great, but the
Yep.
real life's a little bit different.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes it just takes some time too.
Yeah. So then you had two deployments.
Yep.
Then you went in 2019 to Ukraine,
Yep.
and then just recently in 2023 you were in the Horn of Africa and parts of Africa for a significant amount of time over. You came back during the summer, correct?
Yep.
All right. And then, so what can you tell me a little bit like about your experiences during your deployment?
Yeah, so I had two deployments. My first one was in 2019 and 2020,
Yeah.
and that was with the 32nd Brigade, Infantry Combat Brigade, and it was an advisory mission into Ukraine.
Okay.
And the idea was that we were going to help staff a multinational joint training center there,
Okay.
and it was kind of in the western side of Ukraine, close to the Poland border. But it was a multinational training center, so the U.S. was there, British were there, Lithuania was there, Canadians were there. I think at one point Germany had people, but they kind of would come and go at every point. So then obviously Ukrainians. So that was my first deployment. I deployed as a brigade battle captain advisor, and so I worked with the operations cell, so to speak, and you would have Ukrainian units coming into the training center. We would work with the Ukrainian trainers and our multinational partners, run through a bunch of kind of training exercises, and teach them more NATO type of doctrine. So they're kind of used to more of the Russian kind of doctrine. The idea was kind of teach them kind of how NATO operates in case we ever had to work with Ukraine. And they had to kind of understand, some of our tactics or how to make them better too. So that was a 10-month deployment to Ukraine, and then I did another deployment to the Horn of Africa in 2022 to 2023, and I worked with the CJTFOA, so it was the combined Joint Task Force Horn of Africa. It was about a task force, kind of mixed of Army, Navy, Marines, Special Forces, and it was mainly focused in like the eastern part of Africa than the Horn. And my job there was the force protection chief for, I guess, the task force.
Okay. And then, so during both of your deployments, what do you like consider to be like, with all you did, like your biggest contribution in each of those deployments?
I don't know. I think that's a hard question. I think that both of those deployments were very, very different, and they both had good experience, positive experiences. They both had challenges that it's hard to like compare them. I think if I had to pick one, I don't know. I don't think I could pick one. It's just they're just so different in the capacity, and kind of how both of them, with current events going on in the real world, how they kind of been a factor in kind of the current world status, I guess.
So then, when you went to the Horn of Africa, then like being a force protection officer, that's very different than what you like, as you said, when you were in Ukraine. So what was like so different, and like was there like any difficulties with being a force protection officer in Africa compared to your time when you were in Ukraine?
I think the force protection chief job, it was way more challenging. Very complex operating environment. And really at the end of the day, I was the person that was in charge of protecting all of the forces, under CJTFOA, and and protecting operations kind of going on. So like it's a lot of weight on your shoulders, because that's a no-fail mission. It's protecting troops. The Ukraine deployment for me was a little bit different. That was advising non-combat, and kind of like training. So I think that's probably the biggest difference.
Was there like to bounce off the vivid memories and training? Was there like any like significant memories from either of your deployments that you like took away from, or like that you can still think about today?
Yeah, I guess my last deployment, the memories that I had were, we got to travel a ton. And I think the travel aspect is something that I took out. Yeah, I think I went to 5 or 6 different African countries, which, as a normal person, I probably never would have gone to those places. So I think that that was pretty memorable. The Ukraine one, um, honestly, I guess the biggest one was, COVID,
Yeah.
COVID-19. I was, on a trip in Czech Republic. We were supposed to go to, Austria, and then COVID hit. Borders were getting shut down. You had to get back, within 10, 12 hours before you got stuck. And COVID really changed that whole deployment. And obviously the world too at the time. So
Yeah.
it's probably the biggest ones that kind of resonated with me.
Yeah. And then so in between your deployments, you had to transition back from being out in Europe or out in Africa, then you had to transition back into civilian life.
Mm-hmm.
So what was that transition like coming back from deployment?
I think my first deployment transitioning was a little bit harder
Yeah.
compared to my second one. I think the biggest reason, or the catalyst, I guess, is the first time you go through it, you don't really know what to expect.
Yeah.
The second time, you kind of know what to expect. My first one, just got married before deployment, and yeah, and you come back completely different, lifestyle. You got to kind of reintegrate with the wife, family. You both were used to living in different conditions,
Mm-hmm.
not living with people. So that integration part can be difficult. The first one, I had a little bit more challenges compared to my second one. But the military has done a better job within the kind of last years leading up from the war on terror. Was that they implemented a program called Badger Yellow Ribbons. So it's kind of a reintegration program when right before you leave for deployment and you come back for deployment. You have a bunch of conference kind of meetings. You bring your spouse in there. They give you all information like resources that's available, coaching. So nowadays compared to in the past, there's a lot more resources available for soldiers to kind of reintegrate.
Yeah. And then so when you come back and like when you worked on like reintegrating, was there any like habits that you like had developed while you were deployed that you like had to break when you come back here, or was like there any like things that you were so used to doing that like it was just felt weird that you weren't doing them?
I think not being when you come back from deployment, you got your leave time.
Yeah.
So your non-working time. For me, it was weird, not having to wake up,
Mm-hmm.
not and having to cook your own food because when you're on deployment, people you got your cooks and everyone who make
Yeah.
food, and you go and grab your tray and put food down there and eat it. So like simple stuff like that. Going to grocery stores is weird when you
Yeah.
get you're used to this little shop head thing with very little stuff, and then you go into the local grocery store and you see 30 different
Yeah.
types of yogurt. It's just weird things like that kind of take some time to kind of figure out.
Yeah. And so then once you had started transitioning back into civilian life, what like job route, obviously, as we can see in your uniform, you ended up becoming a police
Mm-hmm.
officer. What prompted you to go down that route instead of in other roads you could have gone?
I would kind of like, kind of like I was brought up in a military, pro-military family. Kind of same with law enforcement. I think at a young age, I kind of always, knew I wanted to do it. I like the service aspect that you know. Also, I like not having a desk job. I like not being stuck in a cubicle behind a desk working on a computer. For your career, I like being able to do something different. Getting out and talking to people, engaging with people. And for me, it's just something that's always been more interesting
Yeah.
than that. I kind of figured I can I have done and are doing the the military aspect, and the police aspect kind of gave me an opportunity to work on with the communities you kind of live
Yeah.
with and associate with. So my brother was a cop before me. I was kind of on the fence if I wanted to do it or not. Saw my brother, became a deputy first, and then I was like, I put myself through school and also did the law enforcement route.
Yeah. So was there any challenges that differed from your deployments, that like from military life to being a police officer? Like what were like the differences there, and like were there any challenges that you faced with how they were different?
I think they're very different with I guess just the jobs in general, but I think that they also complement each other
Hmm.
pretty well. So um, it's just two different jobs, completely. It's kind of hard to compare and
Yeah.
contrast. Although we also do use similar tactics, it's not.
Yeah.
We're not on the police side. You're not a military function.
Yeah.
Um, so it's I guess it's different.
Do you feel like being a police officer helped you in your second deployment at all?
I do. I think it's just. I think both jobs has helped me in their own different ways,
Yeah.
and just being better at each other's jobs. So I think me being a police officer made me a better soldier, and I think me being a soldier makes me a good police
Yeah.
officer. And you learn and develop stuff on both sides, and skill sets and experiences and stuff that you learn in one, help translate into the other.
Okay. And then, so with being a police officer, what did the toll on the police department, like during your second deployment, they have to hold your spot for you when you
Mm-hmm.
get back? How did that toll like take on the police department from what you know, and like how
Yeah.
did you feel like they did?
Uh, so our police department's small. It's 20 people.
Yeah.
When you have, and yeah, you're right that they have to, per law, they have to hold your spot while you're gone. They can't punish you for deploying and and serving with the military. But they don't fill your spot, right? So other officers and other people at the department have to pick up the kind of your workload. And at the time, they were hiring some new people. They had a couple vacancies. So I think at one point our police department was down like 4 people, 5 people maybe. So I mean that can directly relate to people being overworked, extra hours, not being able to take vacation times and stuff like that. So it's kind of all hands on a
Yeah.
deck thing. So I'm not when I go and do military service, I go deploy. The people at the police department also have to
Yeah.
kind of do that as well.
So how do you feel like our Pewaukee Police Department compares to like others in the area?
I think my experience with you know I kind of put our police department through the ringer the last 5 years. I did.
Yeah.
I was gone for 2 years for two different deployments. Within 5 years. So, and they've been nothing but supportive, which you don't see that all the time.
Yeah.
Um, uh, and they've helped in numerous ways. Reaching out to my family while you're gone. And just kind of keeping up, communicating with you, letting stuff
Yeah.
going on. They've been really supportive, through both deployments, compared to some of the other
Yeah.
either employers or police departments, whatever you want to call it within that I've had experience as
Yeah.
well.
And then so obviously like you said they did a great job. So you actually nominated them for the Freedom Award.
Yep.
And then so they got this award, and are you able to talk about this award at all?
Yeah. So the Freedom Award is it's the highest award in the nation, and it's issued by the Secretary of Defense. And I nominated them. I believe they actually won the award in 2021. And I was following my first deployment to Ukraine. And really, you kind of do a write up on the nomination side, and then I think there's a lot of nominations that get put up, and very few people actually end up winning the award. Generally, I think if you end up winning it, in the past they've brought people out to Washington D.C. where the Secretary of Defense actually issues it. The year that we won it, it's kind of at the height of COVID, so it's something a little bit more small that they were awarded in uh, was it Elkhart Lake, and but it was top generals from Wisconsin were there, the governor was there, and I believe Wisconsin that year won. 3 employers had won Freedom Awards, which was kind of unheard of at the time.
Yeah. And then, so are you willing to share anything about being deployed that took on as a toll for your family and as both a police officer and active duty?
I think the biggest thing, obviously you being gone, the family have to take care of everything at home, for you, so um, I think that job that I'm just doing my job there,
Yeah.
but like your family back here has really the brunt of everything, right?
Yeah.
They have to file your taxes. They have to keep up with the house. Do everything on their own. So I think that that's probably a big challenge for them. But it helps being able to now have constant communication, phone, voice chat,
Yeah.
FaceTime, email, whatever. So I think having that communication now, where I could be halfway across the world and you'll pick up a phone and call your family, I think that helps out.
Yeah. And so then with your service, what are you willing to share, like any life lessons or like big takeaways you've learned while you've been part of the Army,
Yeah,
National Guard?
I think the biggest thing that really I've taken out of the military service and the police service, I think, is the relationships you build, uh, you know, with people throughout your career. I can kind of go anywhere in the
Yeah.
United States, and I'll know someone that I've worked with, served with, or whatever, and everyone's usually like, hey, stop by. You can spend the night. We can meet up for whatever. So I think the relationships you build, I'll run into people on the military side that I haven't seen in like 10 years. But you always have those experiences and relationships that you've developed, over the course of years that don't go away.
Yeah.
I think it's, for me, that's probably the biggest thing is the relationships
Yeah.
you've built with people.
And so, like, is there anything then with like these takeaways that like you knew going into service that like you now know now that if you like pass it along to someone who's now going into training or now joining the RPC that you'd tell them and that they could know going into it?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, that I could think, if someone wants to kind of get into it, listen to people that have been through it, have had experiences. Listen to your superiors, listen to your peers.
Yeah.
Have a mentor or multiple mentors, because really you learn from other people's life experience, whether that's whatever job it
Yeah.
is. So the don't come in thinking everything, because even now, like on both sides, I don't know everything, and
Yeah.
I'm still learning and kind of developing through both careers, I guess.
All
So
right.
yeah.
All right. And so you still are active duty with the National Guard. So there's the chance that you would be deployed again. Will you be deployed again? And would you want to be deployed again?
So I got about 6 years for until I hit my 20-year
Yeah.
kind of 20-year mark. It's kind of my goal.
Yeah.
Um, just based off of the cycle, I could have another deployment towards the end. It depends if there's a mission that gets called up or not. So I guess we'll see. But if you gotta go, you gotta go.
Yeah.
But hopefully I'm gonna
Yeah.
have some time at home for a little bit, because I've having 2 back-to-back deployments.
Sure.
Kind of given the Army a lot of time. So I
Yeah.
think now it's time for me to kind of give some more time and effort to the family and the police department. So.
All right. Well, in closing, this has been an interview with Brett Markut regarding his service during his time in the Army and Army National Guard. My name is Carter Bosanec. The time is 10:37. The time is 10:37, and thank you for agreeing to do this interview, and most importantly, thank you for your service.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.